Lady, the guardsman just rode in from the hills and captured a deserter from the night's watch.
Get the lads to saddle their horses.
Do you have to?
He swore an oath can't.
Law is law, lady.
Tell Bran he's coming too.
Ned, 10 is too young to see such things.
He won't be a boy forever. And winter is coming.
In 2011, Game of Thrones took the world by storm. Ned Stark, played by Sean Bean, is the head of House Stark, the ruling family of the North. In this scene, we first hear the phrase, "Winter is coming," the motto of House of Stark. The phrase was used so often that it's taken on a life of its own, even spawning many popular memes. Simply put, it's a warning to be prepared for harsh and unpredictable times ahead. If you've ever been to Minnesota in the dead of winter, you understand exactly how harsh and unpredictable Mother Nature can be. This month, the Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota Metro received 5 to 8 inches of snow in a single day, which ground Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport to a stop, causing delays and cancellations. While no one is impacted more than the travelers themselves, a close second are those supporting the travelers at the airline customer service centers. Jeremy Hyde, Senior Director of Customer Service at Minneapolis-based Sun County Airlines, joins me to discuss how they brace themselves for the coming of winter. This week on Next in Queue, we discuss the impact of weather on contact center volumes, the role and limitations of self-service channels, how stress impacts customer channel choice, how company culture drives agent morale, how to deal with seasonal volume shifts, and why regional work from home is a strategic advantage. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at ajppitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
If you're anywhere in the United States right now, north of the central part, it's probably cold where you are. I know that it's cold where my guest is joining me from today because he is in the great state of Minnesota in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. Welcome, Jeremy Hyde, to Next in Queue. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Rob. Good. Thanks for having me. You're right. It is cold. We got a lot of snow yesterday. Similar to last winter, we made it really far into the winter with almost no snow, and I was starting to think it might not snow in Minnesota anymore. And then Mother Nature didn't like me thinking that way, so she decided to remind me it does still snow here. And I think last time I checked, it was about 8 degrees Fahrenheit out there, so it's snowy and chilly.
Yeah, I was just in Minnesota last week. It was 5 degrees, and for those of you who have never been to a place that gets that cold, I lived in Minneapolis for a couple of years, quite some time ago, and you think you know what cold is, and then you experience a Minnesota cold, and you go, oh, well, that's just different. I've never felt that before.
Yeah, anything above freezing is fine. 30-something degrees, no problem. You start getting below that, though. You start getting close to zero especially. And yeah, you take a breath outside in that cold air and it just hits you in the chest. And you're like, oh yeah, okay, back inside we go.
Yeah. It is ironic, however, that you are the senior director of customer service for Sun Country Airlines.
Yep.
And so we're gonna bring the sun with us because I think we could stand to warm things up a little bit. Before we get into it, I mean, tell us a little bit about your journey. You're there for what, right, 5 or 6 years today,
Yep.
but you've been in the contact center business a long time. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'd have to do the math, but we got to be going on around 20 years or so total, especially if I count a year or two from college. Um, yeah, when I graduated, I was from college. I was looking for a job, and I couldn't find one. I had a degree in human resource management, and there were not a lot of entry level HR positions that were open and available to me. And so a friend was working in a call center. She was a supervisor in a call center and suggested I go over there because I had to pay my bills. And so that's what I did. I started working there. And, if anyone's ever heard me before, has kind of heard the same thing. Like the first couple years, at least, when I was working within the call center there, I was trying to work out of it. I was trying to, this was just the thing that I was doing for a little while to pay the bills. I was pretty good at it. So that worked. But I was going to go on to do something different. But at some point, things just kind of clicked, and it was like, hey, this is interesting. I'm good at it. I was growing in my career. People were mentoring me, and it was like, hey, I can make a good career with this thing. And I found a lot of it so interesting. You get to see so much of what the company does, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It all kind of rolls downhill into customer service. So I thought that was really cool. We had really cool, really good workforce people, some of the best learning and development people I've ever known in my entire life. So I just was surrounded by these amazing people and just continued to soak it up. But so I was an agent, I was a team lead, I was a supervisor, I was a manager, kind of did that whole thing, and have spent my career kind of growing up within contact center. As you said, I've been at Sun Country now for going on 6 years. In addition to the work that I do, my day job, I also serve as the president of the Midwest Contact Center Association, which is a nonprofit contact center networking group. We've got 2 chapters, one in the Minneapolis area and one in Chicago. And that's a big part of my life, a big kind of passion of what I do as well. So much of my success came from others. Those really smart people that I was talking about in workforce and training and all of that. Like they get a lot of the credit for where I'm at today. And so trying to be to others what they were to me is where I spend some of my free time.
Yeah, well, I think that's why I have always wanted to talk with you, and we've been connected on LinkedIn for a long time and talk back and forth there. And you are definitely one of those people who gives back, and that's something that I really, really appreciate about you. You mentioned getting some snow, and when you get snow in the upper Midwest, often it is not just a light dusting, right? It can wreak havoc. You work for an airline. Tell us about what happens when weather events like that occur when you work in a contact center. What's that day like? And what are your agents feeling as they're getting ready to start their day?
Yeah, those are tough days. We've got a new leader that started with us within the last month or so, really lengthy contact center background. And yesterday, during this snow event, as we call it sounds very formal, she was checking in and going, is this normal? I've never seen anything like this. And I was like, this actually ain't that bad. I've seen way worse than this. Yeah, the airline industry, I'm sure there's others that maybe are like this as well, but not a lot, has this unique ability to go from what you expect to happen to something that you could never imagine. I'll give you a really extreme example. March 2020, when COVID was really starting to, take hold in the U.S., I remember a day when people started changing their plans and, all of that. On a day when we should have received about 2,000 phone calls, we had 60,000 attempts. Now, again, very extreme example, but the way that your day goes and the sort of volume that you can receive can change very drastically. You can easily be 400% over forecast with a good snowstorm or a hurricane or wildfires or, anything. So that's tough. And of course, that's when customers really need you the most. And it's frankly, without self-service and things of that nature, it'd be impossible. You could never staff to that demand. But we have things in place. So yesterday, I'm sure there's all sorts of other contact centers that have an all hands on deck sort of a plan that, all right, this person is now an agent for the day and this person is now with this. And I handled 7 text message conversations yesterday myself. I felt like I wanted to pitch in and do what I could do. And so I don't know, we'd have to ask those 7 people whether or not they got good service, but that's the sort of thing, you make those adjustments. We're a remote environment. We have a lot of part-time employees as well. And so we'll also put the call out, hey, if you can hop on even for 30 minutes. And we've seen some pretty nice adjustments that can be made as a result of that. People going, oh, I'm not doing anything. I could hop on for, like I said, whether it's 30 minutes or 3 hours, and kind of help the customers through that.
Yeah. It is, my experience in the hospitality space and hotel industry very much mirrors that. A lot of that goes hand in hand. You're potentially canceling a flight or looking to reschedule, and then the hotel is next if you were staying in a hotel. Let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned self-service, and the industry is certainly moving toward, and by industry, I don't mean necessarily the airline industry. I mean, contact centers as a whole are moving more and more towards self-service and channels that allow that. I want to talk, number one, about what you guys use in particular and how that helps, because it obviously does when the volume goes through the roof. But then I want to follow up and talk about the critical nature of actually having human agents to talk to. So let's start with the self-service piece and what that accomplishes.
Yeah. We've built out our technology in such a way that when somebody is disrupted, our website recognizes that individual experience of disruption of X minutes, hours, cancellation, whatever the case may be, and will allow them to make changes to the reservation that are appropriate based on the disruption that they've experienced. What's interesting, I think, kind of to your second point, though, is we probably don't see the level of engagement that I would like to see with that self-service. And we built it in such a way that what you can do yourself is the exact same thing that my people can do for you. But I think that yearning for, this is complicated, it's important, I need to talk to a person to be sure, I need to make sure I know that I understand, that I'm confident in what's happening here, overrides a bit. Now, I think there's some things that we can do to try and give more confidence up front and make sure that they understand, like, you can do this yourself. You'll get the same thing that a human could do. So there's tweaking. We need to continue to put people in a position to help themselves. But especially if somebody doesn't travel a lot, they've never been through a disruption. We're not taking business travelers to their meeting in Atlanta for the day. That is not our market. We are taking families who are paying with their own money on vacation to see grandma or on spring break in Mexico. And these folks are traveling once a year, once every 18 months. These are not road warriors that, oh yeah, I'll just flip out my Amex and I'll use my points to, that's not who these folks are. They don't travel a lot. So they want often that human touch. So yeah, have to figure out how to marry those things. We want to be able to scale to the need, which requires non-human support, but recognizing that there's an interest from the customers to have the human support.
You brought up one thing in particular, which I think is knowing your customer base, right? And their proficiency in plan B and plan C. And not every customer is proficient in that. You do have the business traveler, the road warrior, who's like, it doesn't phase them. They just go, oh, well, yeah, of course it's canceled, or of course my flight's delayed, right? But I think something that we discount a little too much, and I'd like to hear your thought on this, is the way people react under stress. And if I've got a trip to go see grandma for Christmas, let's say, right? I mean, that's the time of year that we're in, and my flight gets canceled, my stress level just goes through the roof. And so in my mind, there's also that challenge of doing this thing, which may, for an agent who does it all day long, every day, is super easy. But for the person under stress, who maybe under certain circumstances could do this, but under these circumstances just doesn't want it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And obviously that stress weighs heavy on the agents as well. You know, one of the things that we talk about is like when we put out that request for help on a day like today, and we have an amazing team and people hop on, there's probably also some people that get that message that are scheduled to work later in the day that are going, you know, my throat might be a little scratchy. Maybe today is not the day to show up and get. Today might be tough. You're right though. People struggle with that stress and figuring out how to manage through it. And sometimes that shows up in, I can't possibly do this myself. I need help. Sometimes that shows up with anger and, you know, that sort of thing. And with travel especially, you know, it's not like, oh, like your UGG boots aren't going to arrive in time. I'm physically traveling, maybe with my family, maybe with my children, which is just stressful to begin with. If you've ever taken a small child through an airport, like, you know, it's a stressful situation. Those days are tough. You're glad when you get there. But yeah, so that people often aren't showing up in their finest hour as a result of all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You just touched on this, and I'd like to dig into it a little bit more and kind of what you do to try to mitigate this. And that is the agent response, right? So agents who have gone through this, they know what to expect. Like they know their shift is coming up. They know it's going to be that kind of day. And that kind of day can come with some really upset customers. It can come sometimes with just nastiness coming through. What do you do to, number one, prepare these agents, but also what kind of strategies do you employ to help agents deal with kind of the brunt of that?
You know, with the preparedness, something that we started doing earlier this year, is actually utilizing an AI training tool. So instead of the role play that you would usually do as a new employee, you know, me and Rob are buddied up and we're gonna go through this scenario. You know, often what happens, a couple things happen. One is you're not going to be that mean to me. It's just like you can't, right? Like your buddy from training is not going to cuss you out and tell you what to do with it. And then two, probably you're not going to talk like an actual customer. You're not going to present yourself, your scenario. You're going to give me kind of exactly what I need in the order that I need it. And probably not even on purpose, but just because like you're learning things in that way. You're walking through this checklist of items. And so I think going from training to reality, especially a disruption, a snow event, something like that, that first one that you go through was like, whoa, that's not exactly how we practice that. But we can train the AI to be kind of mean and snotty and to talk like a customer. And so that's what we've started to do is we're utilizing a tool where we've created personas, we create certain scenarios, and both new hires and tenured agents, frankly, we have them practice having these conversations with an AI as the role play, as the customer. And so I think that's helped a little bit to recognize, like, I'm going to get challenged in a certain way. If I don't have the greatest of options to present, the customer isn't just going to go, okay, then, and move on. They're going to push on you and they're going to ask questions, and they might be condescending or rude or upset or whatever the case may be. So I think that's helped in terms of the preparedness. We do see, it's easier to go through these situations when you've been through them before. You know what to expect to some extent. You've built up a toolkit to draw from. You know how to leverage your resources and some great phrases to use and all that sort of thing. So I think that has helped, certainly. The other piece, like, I don't know that we're doing anything that's really groundbreaking, to be honest with you. I mean, all of the sorts of things that any other leader in a contact center that deals with people that aren't nice could probably give some pretty similar answers to what I would give here. I used to work in a space, Medicaid, Medicare, health insurance, where we couldn't fire a customer. Like, if we had a Medicaid customer, we had a regulatory obligation. We had to cover them. And so even if they were unwell and would threaten our people and were really nasty and terrible, like, there wasn't a whole lot we could do about it. When you work in a different industry where there's not a regulatory obligation to maintain a relationship with a customer, that it is kind of nice to, like, with just the people that are really unreasonable, abusive threats, to say, you know what, we're not going to do business anymore. Here's your money back. Let's not do this again. So that, the worst of the worst, like, that is the treatment that folks can get where they are no longer welcome to do business with us. But obviously that's reserved for some really outlier, nasty situations.
Yeah. But those outlier situations are situations that agents remember.
Yeah.
They can weigh on them. And there are lots of organizations, not by regulatory enforcement, but just by their culture, have this customer is always right mindset, even though that whole phrase has been bastardized and taken out of context. And so I do believe that when you are willing as an organization to fire a customer, it tells the agents, like, they've got my back. And there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah. So last week we fired a customer. And this is the first one that I can remember in a long time, frankly. It doesn't usually get to that point. But this person, the language and the threats are just, especially given the situation, are just really mind-blowing. But that individual had called 8 to 12 times that day and just really harassed every single person. And so, to your point, letting the agents know, if I hadn't let those agents know that we fired that customer, they wouldn't know that we have their back. And so we made sure to let them know. First, it was, we've referred this person for review. We've got a process. I don't just sit there and willy-nilly decide that I'm going to fire it. We've got a process. But
that's good. I think that's good.
I think it's good. Checks and balances, right? But we let these folks know, like, first of all, I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Second of all, I want to remind you that, here is our kind of policy around disconnecting on a customer. When they're doing this sort of thing, like, you can choose not to speak with them anymore. I want to make sure you guys all remember that. And thirdly, we referred for this process. We likely will no longer do business with this individual because the way they treated you isn't okay. But had I not closed the loop with those folks, they wouldn't know. What, how would they? So, but that piece, like that culture, in the moment, it only helps so much, right? When you're taking that abuse, like, it's going to weigh heavy on you. But if you've built that culture where your team, whether it's your colleague, your agent coworker, or your lead, or your senior director, like, they've got my back, it can help.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, I mean, you have been in this particular company for long enough that I wonder, do you see, outside of just the stress of weather-related events, do you see an increase of stressful situations around this time of year, right? The holidays, when people are traveling to see family and that kind of thing. Is that typically a stressor that comes across from customers?
I think within our industry, I shouldn't even say it's a uniquely busy time of year, because a lot of other industries are busy this time of year as well. But, starting this weekend, a lot of people are traveling for Christmas, holiday, to see family, that sort of thing. So, in addition to what you're saying, that it's a stressful time of year for some because they've lost somebody and it's bringing up those memories, and for some because they're struggling to afford presents for their children, whatever. On top of all that, like, this is one of the busiest travel seasons of the year. So it certainly is a tough time for us as a result. It's busiest time of year. Anytime that something is at its peak, it's wound tight. Like, things can go wrong. Snow is happening, whether it's in the Midwest or, the East Coast. Like, there's a lot of weather related issues. So yes, it can be a very stressful time of year, and we see that uniquely around this time of year for all of those reasons.
Yeah. I wonder, do you guys, when things come down, like, do you do something special for the agents, like after New Year's and kind of that peak travel season has abated a little bit? What's the environment like after New Year's?
Yeah, we've got a lot of seasonality in our business, again, because it's people paying with their own money, going on vacations and that sort of thing. We definitely see a lot of seasonality. And so winter time, spring break time, that's Minnesotans get out of the snow, go to St. Martin, St. Thomas, Mexico, pick your island that you love, Puerto Rico. But there are times of year, like May in Minnesota, things start to come alive. The snow is melted. There's green that you can see again instead of brown. Or September, when kids are going back to school. There's times of year when, like, nobody's traveling. And so we really take advantage of those times and kind of remind people, like, hey, go and do some traveling of your own. Because the demand changes so much, we actually will say, like, May, June, September, whatever, like, would you like to take the month off? Would you like to take 3 weeks off? Like, yeah, go nuts. Let us know. Do you want to reduce your hours, whether you're full-time, part-time, you want to work less? It's good for us, obviously, to try and match the demand and try to align to the seasonality, but it's good for folks to be able to kind of look forward to that as well, take advantage of flight benefits, unwind after a busy season, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I can attest, though, that May in Minnesota is, man, there is just something about it. Before the mosquitoes get really bad, but it's warming up, things are getting green, being out by the lake.
At the end of winter, you're kind of getting to that point every year where you're like, I don't know if I can continue to do this. And then like this amnesia thing happens because as soon as the weather turns, you're like, oh, it's amazing here. Why would I ever leave? And then, and it's just a cycle that repeats itself every year.
Yeah, I think it's like women in childbirth. I think it's a
Yep.
very similar experience. Like, I don't think that I could go through childbirth and ever go, oh, yeah, that's something I want to do again. But there's some kind of magic that happens where they forget about
Yep.
how incredibly painful and brutal that process can be. And I think that's very much like Minnesota winters. Like,
Yeah.
you forget about it and you're like,
Exactly.
summer's amazing here.
It is. There's nothing like being on a lake in Minnesota in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we get ready to wrap up this year, I'm curious to know what you're most thankful for this year.
It's a great question. I mean, in my personal life, I'll start there. Why not? Just have an incredible family, an amazing wife, two incredible children. My oldest daughter is learning to drive, and that's terrifying, but also like it's pretty cool. She's about 6 months out from getting her license, assuming she passes the test. But it's really neat watching the kids come into their own and each of the things that they're accomplishing at different phases in life. So that's super gratifying. We've had a wonderful year together as a family. Professionally, I really the way that this team has developed and come together over the last 5 or 6 years is really amazing. And this team looks incredibly different than it did 6, 7 years ago. Our organization looks a lot different than we did, 7, 8 years ago. And the way that this team continues to build together to support each other, the way that they show up, not only for customers, but for colleagues as well. We just continue to do a lot of really, really cool things. And all of that is possible because of, who we are and the way that we go about our business. And so I'm just really grateful for the people personally and professionally that are in my life. That's what makes it all special. So I guess that's what it would be.
That's pretty awesome. There's nothing wrong with that answer at all. I'm curious, you talk about the organization changing.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about some of those changes and some of the things that you think have been most impactful as it relates to the contact center? Like, what kinds of things have you guys done over the past, let's say, 5 years that have really kind of changed the way that you do business?
Well, starting at kind of the organizational level, for folks that aren't familiar with us, Sun Country, Minneapolis-based. I hate to call us regional because that's kind of discounting who we are and what we are, but we are very entrenched in the Minneapolis market. The organization changed to a low-cost, kind of a la carte model 7 or so years ago, and that was hard. The change from kind of the old business model to the current was hard on customers. It was hard on employees. The reality was we wouldn't probably still be sitting here if we continued to try and operate the way that we used to. And so the changes that were made were really necessary and had to find the balance of a business model that was financially sustainable, but also delivered on something that we could all be proud of. And so there's growing pains associated with that. More specific to our team, the contact center, I mean, it started with rebuilding a lot of just core functionality, workforce management, learning and development, all of those sorts of things, making sure, from workforce perspective, like, did we have a solid forecast? Did we have a sense of what might happen? Did we understand the bands of kind of change that could occur? How do we build staffing that's flexible and dynamic? How do we respond? It used to be like you couldn't. And it used to be we all worked in the office near the airport. And so on snow days like yesterday, not only were we challenged because our volume was much, much higher, but people literally couldn't make it into work because they couldn't drive or didn't want to drive through the snow. And so that's a double whammy. I've got less people to deal with more volume. So we've shifted to a fully remote, heavily part-time group of team members. We're spread out. We try and remain focused in the upper Midwest, where people can take advantage of flight benefits, but two, kind of know who we are. We've got the brand presence as an employer. Our part-time program has been incredibly powerful because we can, one, match the demand more effectively rather than just 8 and 10-hour shifts. You've got just these big blocks of time, and you're overstaffed here and you're understaffed there. Instead, you start doing some micro scheduling, 3, 4, 5-hour shifts, the days and times when you need it most. During the busy times, maybe they're working a little more. During the slow times, maybe they're working a little less. There's a lot of things like that we've done that frankly are just very kind of nuts and bolts, kind of tactical. It's not like AI revolutionized what we're doing here, but we did have to challenge the way that we approach certain things and think about, like, is there a different way? We've become an employer that is a great employer for a different type of employee. A remote part-time employee in small town, not in Minneapolis, in small town, Minnesota, Wisconsin, whatever it may be, like we're great for them. They love us. It's a different type of employee than we used to hire. So those are the sorts of things really that we've been working through. It's like, all right, what are the problems? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? And going out and finding things like that and kind of retooling and rebuilding to position ourselves as best we can.
I mean, with all of the talk about return to office, and there is a lot of talk and there are a lot of reasons for it in a lot of different industries, but you hit on something that I've been harping on for years, and that is the remote model, which doesn't have to be work from anywhere. Right? In your case, it's not necessarily work from anywhere, but it is a regional work from home model. Does something for a contact center that is critical to the nature of the business, which is we need to be able to respond to customers regardless of weather, power outages, internet challenges. And when you centralize those operations in a facility, you subject yourself to a potential critical failure in your ability to be able to do business at all. And so that work from home model that you describe, if the snow comes, let it come. We'll still answer the phones and the text messages and whatnot. If one person loses power at their home, it affects one person. It doesn't affect my entire operation. If, I was in a contact center where the fiber got cut to the building. Like, you're done. Yeah. Like, there was literally no internet in the building for an entire day because the fiber got cut. Like, you're just done at that point. And so that resilience, I know that there are all kinds of reasons to champion being in an office, and there are all kinds of reasons that meeting people physically has benefits, but don't just discount the benefits to your business of having a remote workforce. And one of the things that you brought up is I'm able to employ people in areas where they might not have the same kind of opportunities. Like Minneapolis is a huge city. There are all kinds of job opportunities. But if you get to outer Minnesota or Wisconsin outside of the big cities like Milwaukee or Madison or what have you, those opportunities, like it's maybe I can work at a Walmart or I can go to the dollar store, or, you know, I don't have a ton of options. And so being able to work from home and just know, like, I need a good internet connection and I can work and make a living, like that's a big deal to a lot of people.
Absolutely. Well, and you mentioned something throughout all that as well, and I completely agree with you. Hiring remote, hiring work from home doesn't have to be, and for me, should not mean hire from anywhere. Now, don't get me wrong, we hire from all over the place, onesie twosie. There's a specific town that I'm not going to tell you the name of, and we hire within a 50-mile radius of that town. That is our spot. We love it. There are not the same amounts of opportunities. We don't see the same sort of wage pressure. There's just this really, really great workforce that continues to be really, really great for us. And so we concentrate on a specific area. And if I was somebody out there that was getting started or starting to go remote or whatever, that's what I would be thinking about, is like, what are the unique needs of my business, or the unique benefits that we offer as a business, and then let's hone in on a regional focus where we want to hire as a result. Interestingly, we're fully remote. Like, we interview, onboard, train, like everything. Like, you do not need to step foot, and you may never step foot into our building. But what a regional focus does allow you to do, we've gone and done in-person job fair sorts of things. And so if you're trying to figure out, like, if you identify the town, the city, the region, whatever, where you want to hire, and then you're like, but how do we let them know? You can still show up in person there, start to build some buzz, and then shift it to your remote processes. And like, even when we do that, we still then go back and like, all right, we're going to schedule you for a remote interview. We're going to get on a video call and see how you do over the phone with the technology, you know, all that sort of thing. But yeah, 100%. But if something changes in that market, all of a sudden it's not a good market, there's some local thing that happens or whatever, I can go somewhere else. And that's the beauty. Is like, if you're locked in person, you got to show up to this building. Minneapolis a couple years ago had the lowest unemployment rate in the country. It was like 2%. And the wage pressure was crazy. And so it's like, in that situation, if I was locked in, I would never have been able to find and keep the people that I needed just because of all of those external factors. But I wasn't. I was like, all right, forget it. We don't hire in Minneapolis. Like, team, don't. When you get resumes, I want you to focus on this little town that we really like to hire from people. So yeah, doesn't mean hire from anywhere.
Yeah, well, and the nice thing too is the word spreads in those little towns about this great employer, and you can become an employer of choice even though you don't have a physical presence there. And that there's a certain affinity too to the brand and to the company that can occur when you're taking that kind of approach.
Yeah, you get your employees posting in the local community Facebook group, and then all of a sudden you've got 10 more applications coming in, and absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, it has been absolutely my pleasure to get to talk to you. I really just have one more question before we wrap things up, but I do want to encourage people to go down to the show notes. There's going to be a link to your LinkedIn. Make sure you reach out to Jeremy. If you're interested in the Midwest Contact Center Association, there's no better person to talk to than this guy and find out more. I know I haven't been, but I know they do some great in-person events in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I think last year you guys did like a Saints game or a Twins game. I can't remember, one or the other.
We did.
Maybe
we did
both.
the Twins this year. We did the Saints the year before. Absolutely. We do that We do that once a year, so that's a great place to come and check us out.
Yeah. Okay. If you are going to take a trip on a Sun Country airplane today to one of the destinations that you service, where are you going, Jeremy?
All right. Because I can never just give like a straight answer that follows exactly the guidelines of the question that was answered. I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
The first one is the trip that we're actually taking in the spring for spring break. That's St. Martin. We went last spring break and loved it. And we were trying to decide, we're very much like Caribbean island sort of a family. So this year we're like, oh, where do we go? Do we check out something different? And we're like, we loved it the last time we went. Like we could just go back. And so we're going back to St. Martin. We're staying in the exact same place that we stayed. All of that. So St. Martin is great. It was so much fun, so beautiful, plenty to do. So St. Martin is one. Another one that I'll mention just because maybe people aren't as familiar with it, Roatan. Roatan is a small island off of the coast of Honduras.
Honduras, yeah, I know it.
And I haven't been. My father-in-law has been. I know others that have been and have loved it and just thought it was amazing. And, people wouldn't normally think of Honduras as their, spring break or winter destination, but this little island it's the place that tourists want to go to, again, be on an island, have great weather. I think they've got some rainforesty type things going on as well. So that's on my list to visit at some point.
I have not been to Roatan. I have been to Honduras, and I hear it is amazing. So I very much enjoyed the time that I spent in Honduras, even though it's for work. But it was a good stay. It's great. Go. The weather's amazing. Like, just go do it. Jeremy, thank you so much for being on Next in Queue. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.